everyone. While the present social security system is the result of decades of development work, its basis was laid down in a very different world from ours. For this reason, a new social security model will be tried in Finland. A unique basic income experiment was launched in Finland in 2017. The aim of the experiment is to determine whether the social security system can be simplified and provide a stronger incentive for finding employment. At present, finding a job does not necessarily increase the income of an unemployed person, because earnings lower their social benefits. 2,000 random participants were chosen for the basic income experiment from among unemployed persons between the ages of 25 and 58. Kela has notified the participants of their selection, and individual citizens are not eligible to apply for basic income outside of this experimental group. During the experiments, the participants receive a basic monthly income of 560 euros. For example, should the unemployment benefit of the participant be higher than the basic income, the participant can apply for the exceeding amount from Kela. The basic income is a tax-free benefit and will not be reduced by any other income the participant may have. So, if the participant finds a job during the experiment, he or she will get both the salary and the basic income. The experiment will run for 2 years, and the employment situation of the participants will be monitored throughout the experiment, which will examine the question, could basic income increase employment and simplify the social security system? Kela will be responsible for implementing the experiment. For more information on the basic income experiment, go to kela.fi/basic income.
Okay, so we lost it again. Okay, so what we actually have is not a universal basic income experiment. So it's really a limited experiment. It's only looking at those people who have a flat rate unemployment compensation. And those who are on flat rate unemployment compensations, they are either young people without work history and without earnings-related unemployment benefit insurance, or they are long-term unemployed who have exhausted their right for earnings-related unemployment benefit. So it's just a very a specific group. And in this group, we are as was said in the video, we are mostly interested in labor market outcomes. And what's really a weakness of this study is that we don't have any baseline for subjective well-being. So we can study also other effects of basic income besides employment effect through register data. So we have very comprehensive register data, but we can't look into subjective well-being since we don't have a baseline. I'm not going to go to the details of our system, but if you're interested, we can come back into those details. Just one detail I have to mention, which is that we already have income disregard of 300 euros in the unemployment benefit system, which means that you can earn as much as 300 euros without any reduction in your income. So basic income is mostly having an effect on those incomes which go above 300 euros. An additional feature of basic income, so the experiment group, is that they are not subjective to active labor market policy measures. So if they refuse to participate in training or subsidized work, they're not going to lose their basic income. So that's another dimension. So it means that we are really looking into if carrots work better than sticks, because those people who are getting the basic income, they are not getting any sticks, meaning that if they would refuse a job offer, they would lose their unemployment benefit as sanction. And this is, as was said in the video, this is a RCT, randomized controlled trial, so we're expecting to have results which will be high quality results and also appreciated by international research community. So far there has been a lot of discussions about basic income also in Finland, and it seems that everybody has already an opinion on basic income. So it has really promoted discussion and debate about basic income in Finland. And also those problems of basic security have become more visible, which is also having an effect on how the basic income, the basic security system will be regulated in the future. So what we are expecting is a kind of a gradual incremental stepwise change in our basic security system. So towards more individual entitlements to social security, and also the reducing the role of social assistance, because social assistance is the last year means-tested program, which is really stigmatizing, and it involves a lot of bureaucracy. And if we are about to make this experiment permanent, we would reduce dramatically the role of social assistance. And of course that would also ensure equal treatment of all claimants. Some things to consider in the future are combining basic income with housing subsidies and perhaps with other benefits as well. The current situation of this experiment is that also the resistance inside Finland has become visible, and there are some people who are really aggressively against this idea of basic income, even in the form which we have it, so partial basic income. And the government decided not to invest any more funds into this experiment in their midterm review in April this year. And they would already like to see some results coming out of this experiment, and that's of course not possible since the results will be ready only after 2018. But as I said, there is a lot of discussion about this idea, and my personal view is that this is probably going to have a positive employment effect, because there is such a big incentive for getting small or even larger incomes from work. And well, some recipients of basic income, they have been interviewed in the media. The research team is discouraging this because they think that it's going to contaminate the experiment group, but those views so far expressed are very, very positive, and I think there is a positive expectations towards the experiment. And let's say that we would have a positive results coming out of this experiment, and that would probably lead to conclusions that this idea could be applied also in other contexts, perhaps in the larger European context. But I would be kind of cautious in drawing such conclusions, because it could be also the fact that we have other labor market policies, that we have universal health care, that we have a very good education system, which could also play a role. I mean, if we compare Finland with countries from a totally different context. But my idea if I just take 1 minute to present my idea for European basic income, I would tie that to the discussion on European minimum social standards, which are really relevant, especially in the monetary union context. When we have those government budget deficits goals, and also the goals for public debt, And when we have a recession, that leads to austerity measures, and the austerity measures are most often targeted on social benefits, meaning that those most vulnerable individuals in the society will suffer most, and they will bear the hardest burden of recessions. And for those groups, we would need sort of a minimum standards to protect them from austerity measures. And then this idea could be linked up with the idea of basic income, but that would need to be expressed in relative terms and not in absolute terms. And of course, when we talk about population groups, we could also pay attention to the fact that people are most, when it comes to this whole discussion on deserving and non-deserving poor, children is really the group to look for, because no one can say a child is to be blamed for his or her poverty. And I think there is a strong case to start with the children. Thank you.
Thank you for this really interesting presentation. Now for the questions. Francois, you had a question? Should you go for? Okay. Let's continue and then we'll go to the questions.
Why can't we just debate a little bit?
What I'm saying is linked. I mean, it's really linked to that very much. So I think it makes sense also in terms of time.
We had past contemporary position in the future now of the experiments, and then we have a debate. So all three presentations are linked to some extent.
I don't have anything about pilot, so I don't want to be included. I want to be separate.
You are going to be separate.
We'll have the questions after Daniel finishes, and then to the Slovenian part. Okay.
Sorry for the additional technical break. Not yet.
Yeah, it's not right.
Okay, I'm starting in the meantime. Basically, I just don't want to grab your mental capacity into very further depths. Just throw a few more ideas also about some information about the ideas that in unconditional basic income Europe we developed about further pilot projects or experiments on a European level. And I think yes, excellent. Okay, sorry. What I'm trying to do is just to give you some information about what we've developed in unconditional basic income Europe in terms of thinking so far about basic income experience in a EU setting, also based very much on what Anya and Heike just said. I would also agree with Anya and Heike that I think pilot projects or so are, I mean, if we have the expectation that it's really going to show us how basic income would work, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, basic income is really such a fundamental change of how society is organized and economy is organized, that I don't think that there can be ever, so that's why I actually came during the works preparation of this also more or less, yeah, I'm not sure yet, but maybe we should also forget the pilot project expression, because I think it's probably misleading, so experiments or testing is probably a better term. Can I? It's okay, I think I can work with this. Can I use it? Yeah, okay. So, it's good to have these experiments, so even if they are limited in their value, because they can help, for example, to disperse with false assumptions. So as Heikki said, provide hard data against all those kind of assumptions that people in the basic income debate, whether they're pro or against, have on human behavior or particular effects. And I think also what Finland shows very much, that also pilot projects help to foster the debate. So we have this very limited experiment in Finland, but the whole world is watching, the whole world is debating it. It generated, I think I mean, together with the Swiss referendum, but it was probably, as far as I follow media, the Finnish experiments received really an incredibly amount of international media attention. And of course, the outcome of the experiment can help to continue this debate. So therefore, I think it's good to have those, it's important to have those. And as also Heikki said, in the end, it's true that if we have one particular experiment with one particular set of questions and in a certain socio-economic context, it will be still the question if this can be translated to other countries, other settings. So therefore, I also think it's very good to have more experiments that generate somehow also comparable outcomes, so that you can say, okay, we run a very similar test in Spain and Slovenia and Denmark, and that's what we got. Sorry? We try. You can't make it big or large screen, because it.
We can also share
Yeah? Yeah, it's okay. Okay, but can I still? No, it's okay. It's okay. I'll try to make it understandable also without the slides. Okay. I have no nice pictures. I have no charts in it. It's just text. I'm sorry. Yeah. Cool. So there's it. Okay. I'm sorry. I did it on a different platform, but it's. So why to do this in an EU setting? I mean, one argument can be that it helps also regional and local authorities, so it helps us to convince regional and local authorities to run these experiments if they are not the only ones to carry the whole burden of costs of financing it. And then, the assumption, I'm going to try to show a few figures afterwards, that there is actually enough money in various EU funds to at least co-finance such experiments, especially since the benefits are also European, so we all learn from those. Why should we leave the whole financial burden to certain regions? And then, of course, it would also help to have an EU-wide debate on basic income, and to, as I said, against this argument that but this is only for this country, and that would of course also help to inject European proposals, like we heard in the morning, into this debate, and that would also apply already for the definition of the experiments, that if we do EU funding, we can start talking already before we define the questions and the setup of the experiments. Okay, how can we do this in order to have a European added value in terms of learning from this? Yeah, so then the question is a little bit, okay, how do we define? I mean, we heard that why, for example, the Finnish experiments or earlier experiments are somehow also limited. Then I think before we start into this, we need also to debate a little bit. So these are just a few thoughts, and I'm sure it's incomplete. That can be extended. So. I mean, unless we want to follow Heike's suggestion and focus on children or focus on farmers, I think it's important to have the universal aspect. So have in a given community where we test it, all individuals should have the same chance to be part of the sample, and also to be able, in order to look at things like labor market impacts, change of behavioral in terms of also community, it needs also a substantial amount of citizen within, so the sample must be high enough, basically, to be able to observe all the, from our point of view, the positive expectations that we tend to have towards basic income. And also it needs a sufficient time scale. I mean, I think all those who are involved in the debate know that a lot of effects cannot be, I mean, for example, if I'm chosen, but I have a job, it pays a lot, okay, I receive this money, it doesn't really change a lot for me, but then if in 2 years I'm becoming unemployed or I just want to take time out, then it might be relevant. If the experiment is finished by that time, then we cannot measure these kind of effects. And then of course I think basically a proper and well-planned scientific evaluation is also very important to have. Now, okay, how to finance those? That's the big question. I started looking, I mentioned that we had last year a meeting with Laszlo Andor, so that was his suggestion to look at the EU program for employment and social innovation. I did do this, but I'm not fully convinced if it will, but that we can debate later, if it's the right tool for us. If you just read through the aims, I'm going to save you this. You can, if you Google this, you find this on the Commission's starting website. But from the aims of the program, I think it's great. So. Basic income experiment would more or less combat unemployment, long-term unemployment, fight poverty, guarantee decent social protection, etc. It's all tick, tick, tick. And then if we go a little bit more in detail, what I found a little bit more problematic, would there be actually enough money for basic income experiments in this budget? I'm a little doubtful over that. So the total budget of this program for 7 years is 920 million euros, and around 60% of it is directed in the modernization of employment and social policies package. The former Progress program, which would be relevant, and how much of this I see the second branch, the social protection, social inclusion, and reduction and prevention of poverty, the most relevant. There is also some money for cross-cutting issues and so. But if we take this, it would say we would get around 40 million if we really spend the whole budget on basic income experiments and do not leave any other projects to apply for this. We would have 40 million euros per year. Now I don't really manage to collect the information in Finland how much that costs. Of course, you can define experiments also in a way that this is already a substantial contribution, but I sort of doubt it, especially if keeping in mind if we want these experiments in several places at the same time. So let's look at other possibilities. I didn't go so deep into those, also because they are much more general instruments, but there are possibilities under each of them to think about financing basic income experiments. One is the so-called European Fund for Strategic Investments. So this is the, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but correct me, this is the kind of Juncker investment package, which is the advantage of it, it's spent pretty freely. So the way it started up, I don't know if it's still like this, but governments wrote wrong wish lists, what kind of projects they wanted to get financed through this economic boost program, and usually these were all projects that failed to satisfy the usual EU standards for project financing. So, but yeah, kind of pet projects of governments. I hope that improved in the meantime. I didn't really look into that. So yeah, the advantage is it's not so strongly regulated like other EU programs, so there is a bigger room to maneuver, and also it's a quite substantial amount of money, and also in terms of content, since it is meant to deal with asymmetric shocks and stabilization. It could be a good connection to the European basic income dividend debate. The next one, which offers itself sort of quite naturally, is the European Social Fund, which is also a huge amount of money. So it's one of the biggest positions in the EU budget. The disadvantage here is that it's distributed on a national level mainly. So it's not up to the European Commission to say that now every country has to spend that and that much money on basic income experiments. So then we would have to go to the national governments and convince them to give money from that, which already weakens the European aspect of the whole thing. Some additional programs, we can also be creative. So, for example, partnerships amongst the regions and municipalities that are involved in the experiments could be financed through the Europe for Citizens program, the scientific monitoring through Horizon 2020. Horizon 2020 has also a little bit of this idea of finance some social experimentation programs. And then, of course, we talked already about the agrarian basic income as a reshifting of the common agricultural policy measures. I'm almost through, I think. Yeah, the last question, I think, is, okay, now how to convince the actors, the relevant decision makers to do this. Obviously, we need some regions or local authorities who are happy to do this. I just collected out of my head what I'm aware of, which reasons are already considering this. So please feel free to add your knowledge if I forgot some. So with Finland, there are experiments in Netherlands, most of which are, I think, from our point of view, pretty useless. I don't go into that. We had other meetings, but there's a good exception in North Friesland where there's a experiment plan which has also the support of the Dutch basic income movement. Scotland, there are discussions. In France and Spain, there are already regions which have kind of signaled that they are happy to run. And right since the last election, the northernmost region of Germany or province of Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, decided in their new government program to look into basic income. There is, for example, a small island called Hallig-Hooge in North Friesland with 120 inhabitants, which would be a fantastic place, and the mayor there is already fully fired up because 120 citizens to finance basic income, you can do with relative small amount of money, and still you have a nice experiment, and you can actually watch the entire community. They have, I think, even a few unemployment benefit recipients there. So, and then when we have the regions, we need to take this idea to the European level, so to convince the decision makers there to actually give the EU money there. So I think Committee of Regions would be a good forum, or the Economic Social Committee, to start this debate, also because they are usually easier to approach than the other institutions. And then go to the members of the European Parliament and tell them how great idea this is. Yeah, wrapping up. The openness there is already pretty big, especially I think, and I didn't mention this in the beginning, the advantage of experiments is that you can also get the support of those who are skeptical about basic income. So it's not just, you don't only, you have a start into the basic income debate without having to convince the majority first. And then when we've done this, then in this course develop a viable proposal towards the European Commission. I think that's everything I wanted to say on this. Thank you very much.